Heiner, I'd like to turn our attention now to the various tools that are available from a coaching perspective. Are there any in particular that you would suggest, or are they not effective at all?
My position on tools is, like standards, I've always said the beauty about standards is that you have so many to choose from. The same with tools, is you have an incredible plethora of tools. So profiling tools, some of the coaching tools, if you take the Hogan and the Belbins, and there's DISC and there's MBTI and there's all those different tools that we can use. I'm a little skeptical about those, and I think where my skepticism comes from is large corporates like to hire large corporate coaching companies, and many times the assignments run on the back of a tool set. So they'll do a survey or they'll do some work around the particular tool set, and out will come a program that will then be coached to. Now, I'm sure there are very relevant areas where that is very successful. The kind of work I do works one-on-one with executives, and I'm tool agnostic, and I'm desperately trying to stay tool agnostic, because I think that there is a risk that we allow the tool to become everything and to guide us, often at the expense of what that particular individual needs at that point in time, or what their executive is looking for that individual to be coached in. And so if you remember back to the days of IBM mainframe power, no CIO was ever fired for ordering an IBM solution because it was the safe solution. It was a whole lot more complex and risky to go with emerging trends that were less costly but had greater risk, because you are now responsible for making all the different bits and pieces talk to each other. If we look at it from that perspective, then I think the metaphor is that there are horses for courses, and there are times when we can use each or the other. My experience has been that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And from a tools point of view, I use tools that I encounter in the organization of the individual that I'm working with. If they use MBTI and the individual has an MBTI that we can work with, we do, because there may well be value that we can draw from that. But I would be very reluctant to build a coaching program just around a tool. So in a way, I think I'm agreeing with your picture.
Well, and the reason I ask is because I do see companies that have created their own proprietary tool, and they try and sell that as a, perhaps as a replacement for a coach. But it sounds like the human dimension is still a critical part of it.
Very much so. And I don't coach businesses, I coach business people. And they're an individual that have a whole series of things that make them up. All right, we talked earlier on about the attitudes and outlooks and beliefs and all those things. And it's this person that we're talking about that will bring the successes the organisation expects of them and the individual expects of them. And so this is where tools can assist, but I'm very skeptical of them becoming the main game.
All right, thank you. You talk about many of the benefits that are achievable through working with an executive coach. Is this something that everybody could benefit from, or is it only a select few that would use a coach?
Yes, everybody can get value from it, but not everybody does. And there are a few reasons for that. One, not everybody's coachable from the perspective of wanting to fetch an outcome. If somebody is wired to be more a you owe me, bring me person, they're not going to get as much value out of a coaching program as somebody who is really focused on fetching outcomes to improve themselves. Who's not coachable? My experience has been people with an unhealthy ego will usually get in the way of themselves being coachable. And I think if we look at this concept of bring and fetch, that prevails. Before I work with a client, I'll sit and have an exploratory conversation with them, and as much as that gives them an opportunity to assess whether I'm the right coach to be working with them for what it is that they want to achieve, I'm also seeing whether this person is coachable. in my work, my clients pay my bill up front before we start, and I have a money-back guarantee. And I've only ever used that once, where I misread that person's ability to fetch the outcomes that they want. And we realized pretty quickly that we weren't going to get the value that we wanted, and we agreed to leave it there. The person that's going to get most value out of a coaching program is the one that really wants to get most value out of a coaching program. Another area is if the boss wants the outcome more than the individual that's looking to be coached wants the outcome, we're not going to get an outcome. So from the perspective of everybody should be able to get value from coaching, not everybody does, because not everybody sees the value that they can get for themselves.
And it's interesting because value is a fairly arbitrary term, isn't it? So how important is it, and for you as a coach, to establish what value or what success looks like for the executive that you're coaching?
Very much so. The alternative is that we're talking about a talk fest here. If a coaching program isn't focused on specific outcomes that we want to achieve, then it's not really a coaching program. And one of the questions that will always go through a coaching program is, what is a result going to look like? How will we know when it's been achieved? So we'll work with a client in a holistic context of a questionnaire up front that looks at a whole bunch of things that are important for that individual at that juncture in their life, and looks at a whole bunch of things from a business perspective that are also important or real for them at that particular point in their life. That will frame the agenda. And the focus then has to be on what outcomes are we going to get from that coaching program, so that we're always focused on relevance.
When it comes to coaching, are we just talking about benefits for the individual, or are there organisational benefits as well? So, for example, would a CEO maybe put his executive leadership team through a coaching program?
When we work with teams, we work with individuals in a team, and we work with the team collectively. And this is where, by the way, tools can be a very useful aid to show where different people fit in and how they are going to be working together. When we're working one-on-one with an individual, they will always come out of a coaching program with a different view and a different mindset than when they came into that particular coaching program. We're just always, if we're open to learning, going to find new perspectives. So when they go back into the workplace and rub shoulders with their peers, they will notice a difference. And this is where I think it's pretty important that the individual is comfortable with the new outlooks that they've got and that they can actually leverage them.
What about organisations where there's many people from different cultures? Of course, the dynamic would be very different in those cases. Can coaching play a role in breaking down some of those cultural barriers?
I think they can, Stephen. Coaches are renowned for their questions. And to be able to ask relevant, incisive questions presupposes a power of observation, presupposes a very strong competence in listening, real attentive listening. Listening at a level that hears what's being said, hears what's not being said, and hears how it's being said. Because therein, in terms of the body language, we all know that the words we use make up 7% of what's being said, and the rest is really in the animation and the posture and so on. So particularly when it comes to cultures, we can't apply the same framework that we apply to the way we see things to the way everybody that we're working with see things. So if we're really listening and we're really observing, we will notice those differences and be able to work with them, and to be able to highlight to peers and to people around them that they are different. Being different doesn't mean that they're right or wrong or good or bad, but understanding that they're different is valuable. And from a communication point of view, from a diplomacy point of view, and from the perspective of getting results that are relevant for each different person's wiring or way that they see things, I think that's a differentiator between coaching and mentoring.
To what extent is coaching specific to the individual, fit for purpose in other words? Is there one size fits all, or are we looking to tailor to the requirements of individuals?
And I think that's very prevalent today, that you don't find just one executive in a team that's got a coach. If the company has a culture that aids that and expects that, then usually you'll find all the executives will have a coach, and a coach that's selected specifically for what it is that that individual is looking for at that point in time. I have really three audiences that are the most prevalent for the work that I do. The one is the executive, and that is focused around that individual being the best that they can be. We talked earlier on a little bit about loneliness, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's in the privacy and the safety of their own office, to have a confidant, to have a challenger, a thinking partner, and then somebody that'll hold them accountable to the things that they want to improve and to change. So that's working with the executive. Another category that is quite prevalent is where somebody needs to be groomed to either in a succession planning sense or needs to be fast-tracked to be ready to take over an executive role. Coaches can be used very effectively to fast-track that process. And the third one is where we have people that have come out of their professional silo, or they're in a managerial role, and we really want to make the transition horizontally into their leadership capability. Putting a coach alongside a person in that transition is proven to be very successful as well. So three very different approaches, but each in their own way addressing a specific need, and all of them making sure that we get the outcomes we were looking for when we started.
Great.